The galactic throne room was silent in a way that felt heavy and alive. Light from 1,000 stars passed through crystal walls and fell across the floor like frozen fire. Tall pillars carved with the history of old empires surrounded the hall. At the center stood the throne, ancient and powerful, shaped from dark alien metal. Upon it stood the alien queen. She was tall and calm, her crown glowing with soft energy, her eyes sharp and controlled. She did not sit, she stood, because this was not a moment for comfort. This was a moment for survival. Before her were the greatest nobles of many species, beings of steel and flesh, scales and light, minds older than human history. They wore armor that showed rank, wealth, and power. Each one believed the galaxy could not move without them. The queen's voice carried across the hall, calm and steady. She did not beg. She did not threaten. She offered truth. Her offer was not only marriage. It was alliance. It was survival. A united front against what was coming. A future where old enemies stood together or fell alone. For a moment, some nobles listened. Then the refusals began. The first noble stepped forward, tall and golden, his voice sharp with pride. He refused her alliance and laughed softly, calling her desperate. Another followed, a warlord covered in scars, who said he feared her power more than the enemy beyond the stars. A third noble sneered and reminded the hall of past wars, blaming her for blood that was not fully hers. More voices joined. Some mocked her openly. Some spoke with careful fear. Some insulted her history and her rule. Each refusal cut deeper than the last. The queen did not react. Her face remained still. Her posture remained perfect. Only her eyes showed the weight of what was happening. The room slowly emptied of voices, until silence fell. It was not peaceful silence. It was tense, sharp waiting. The kind of silence that comes before violence. Along the walls, royal guards tightened their grip on their weapons. Energy blades hummed softly. Armor systems powered higher. One wrong move could turn the throne room into a battlefield. The queen felt the rejection settle into her chest. Humiliation tried to rise. Anger tried to burn. But she crushed both beneath discipline. She had ruled through war and loss. She had buried entire worlds in memory. She would not break here. Still, the refusal mattered, because without unity, the galaxy would bleed, and they were too blind to see it. For a brief second, the queen wondered if history would remember this room as the place where everything failed, where pride won and survival lost. Then something changed. From the far edge of the hall, beyond the nobles, beyond the bright armor and glowing banners, movement appeared in the shadows. A single figure stepped forward. Whispers spread instantly. A human. Small, fragile, soft compared to the others. No armor covered him. No weapon was raised. No guards followed him. The nobles laughed quietly. Some shook their heads. Others ignored him completely. Humans were new to the galactic stage. Young, weak, unimportant in the eyes of empires. The human walked slowly, calmly. Each step echoed louder than expected. The queen watched him closely now. Not because he was dangerous, but because he was unexpected. He stopped a few steps before the throne. All eyes turned to him. Everyone waited for him to speak, to beg, to boast, or to make some foolish human promise. Instead, the human lowered himself to one knee. The sound of his movement was small, but the impact was massive. Gasps echoed through the hall. Nobles stiffened. Guards shifted, unsure how to react. The queen's eyes widened just slightly. This was not fear. This was not surrender. This was something else. The human did not bow his head in shame. He knelt with calm purpose, with respect, with choice. In that moment, the galaxy held its breath. And if you want to see what this single kneel leads to, consider subscribing to this channel, because this story is only just beginning. The queen stepped forward. Her shadow fell over the kneeling human. The throne room waited. History leaned closer, and nothing would ever be the same again. The human remained on one knee, unmoving. He did not rush to speak. He did not look around the throne room for approval. He simply stayed where he was, calm and steady. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt different. Curious, uneasy. Then the laughter began. A tall noble with crystal skin, let out a sharp sound of amusement. He pointed one long finger at the kneeling human and shook his head, calling the human weak and foolish. Another noble joined, his voice low and cruel, whispering that humans were soft creatures, fragile bodies, with loud stories. More whispers spread through the court. Humans break easily. Humans fear pain. Humans kneel because they know their place. The words floated through the air like poison. The human heard them all. Yet his breathing did not change. His posture did not weaken. The alien queen said nothing, but her attention never left him. She studied the angle of his shoulders, the steady way he held himself, the lack of fear in his movements. She had seen fear in warriors twice his size. She had seen kings beg on their knees. This was not that. Still, the question burned in the room. Why did he kneel? Was this some human trick? A strange strategy? Or was he simply mad enough to disrespect the throne without knowing it? The queen raised one hand. The nobles fell quiet at once. Even the guard stilled. Her voice cut through the hall, calm and cold. She asked the human why he had knelt. Her words carried no warmth, no mercy, only curiosity edged with danger. Slowly, the human lifted his head. His eyes met hers. He did not flinch. He did not rush. When he spoke, his voice was calm, not loud, not weak, just clear. He said he did not kneel because he was afraid. A ripple of anger moved through the nobles. Some scoffed. Some leaned forward. The human continued, saying he did not kneel because he was forced, nor because he wished to survive at any cost. The queen narrowed her eyes slightly. This answer did not match any pattern she knew. The human explained that humans kneel only when they choose to, not for fear, not for submission, but for respect. A low murmur spread through the court. Respect was a word rarely spoken among empires. The human said humans kneel to honor courage, to acknowledge truth, to show that power does not always come from standing taller than others. Some nobles reacted with anger, calling the words pretty lies, calling humans storytellers, with no strength to back it. One noble stepped forward aggressively, demanding to know what a human could possibly respect in an alien queen feared across the stars. The human did not hesitate. He said he respected someone willing to stand alone in front of enemies and allies alike. Someone who asked for unity when pride would have been easier. The room shifted. That was not the answer anyone expected. The queen felt something unfamiliar stir behind her control. Not hope, not trust, but recognition. The human spoke again, saying humans had learned a long time ago that survival does not belong only to the strongest. It belongs to those who know when to stand and when to kneel. The nobles grew restless. Some demanded punishment. Some accused the human of manipulation. The queen raised her hand again, her gaze never leaving the human. She asked him if he understood where he stood, if he understood that one wrong word could end his life. The human answered honestly, saying yes. That honesty struck harder than defiance. He said humans do not kneel because they are small. They kneel because they are brave enough to show respect without chains. The guard shifted again, weapons humming louder. The queen descended one step from the throne. Her shadow stretched across the floor toward the human. Power radiated from her presence. She studied him closely now, not as a ruler studies a subject, but as a hunter studies something unknown. Then she asked the question that froze the air itself. She asked what the human would do if she rejected him the way the nobles had rejected her. The hall went silent. Everyone understood the danger. This question was a blade. Answer wrong, and the human would not leave the room alive. The human inhaled slowly. The galaxy waited. The queen did not answer the human at once. She turned away from the nobles. Her steps were slow and controlled as she moved closer to the throne, as if the weight of the past had suddenly become heavier than the crown itself. The throne room remained silent. No one dared to speak. Even the nobles who had mocked her earlier now watched carefully. When the queen finally spoke, her voice was lower than before, not weak, but layered with something old. She said the galaxy knew her as a queen of war, a ruler who burned systems and shattered fleets, a symbol of destruction. She paused, then said the galaxy had been told a convenient story. The first war, she explained, did not begin with her command. It began with broken treaties and silent betrayals. Her borders were crossed, while her envoys still waited for answers. Her people were attacked, while councils debated words. She spoke of worlds lost in days, of civilians turned into numbers, of choices forced upon her when peace was no longer possible. The Second War followed the first, not because she desired it, but because weakness invites hunters. She said each war blamed on her had one thing in common. The same noble houses funded both sides. The same empires sold weapons to enemies and allies alike. At this, several nobles shifted uncomfortably. The queen continued. She said while her fleets bled, others grew rich. Trade routes expanded through shattered systems. Resources were claimed from ruined worlds under the name of reconstruction. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse directly. She simply told the truth as it had happened. The galaxy, she said, chose a villain it could point to, because blaming one queen was easier than admitting shared guilt. Throughout her words, the human did not move. He did not interrupt. He did not speak. He listened. This alone began to shock the court. Nobles were used to arguments, interruptions, demands for proof. But the human offered none of that. He listened as if every word mattered. The queen noticed this. Her gaze returned to him briefly, then back to the hall. She spoke of peace offers ignored, of warnings dismissed as threats, of councils that smiled while sharpening knives behind closed doors. She said the truth was buried under fear and profit, and once buried, it became law. The silence in the throne room grew heavier. Some nobles avoided her eyes. Others stared openly, daring her to accuse them by name. Still, she did not. When the queen finished, she stopped speaking as suddenly as she had begun. The echo of her final words lingered like smoke. The court waited for reaction, for denial, for outrage, for violence. Instead, the human slowly lifted his head again. His expression had changed, not with anger, but with understanding. Humans were new to the galaxy, their fleet small, their influence limited, but they had survived their own history of lies and wars. The human spoke calmly, saying that humans observe because they must. Because when you are small, missing patterns is deadly. He said humans learn to watch who profits when blood is spilled, to follow trade instead of speeches, to track silence as closely as declarations. A low murmur spread through the nobles. The human continued. He said the queen's wars followed the same pattern each time. An attack, a forced response, a flood of resources moving through the same noble networks. He named no houses, yet many felt named. He said humans noticed that peace always became possible only after profits were secured. The queen turned fully toward him now, her eyes sharp, searching. The human then did what no one expected. He stood. Gasps echoed across the hall. Guards stepped forward. Weapons rose slightly. The human raised his hands calmly, not in surrender, but in clarity. He looked toward the nobles, his voice steady. He said the galaxy had been fed a lie, a simple one, convenient and useful. He said blaming one queen kept many hands clean. At this, the court erupted. Nobles shouted. Accusations flew. Several demanded the human's immediate execution. The atmosphere turned hostile in seconds. Guards moved into full combat stance. Energy crackled through the air. The queen raised her hand sharply. Her command cut through the chaos. But the damage was done. The truth had been spoken aloud, and the court could never unhear it. The human stood surrounded by enemies. The queen stood between past and future, and the throne room stood on the edge of violence. The throne room exploded with sound. Shouts overlapped. Voices rose in anger and fear. Several nobles stepped forward at once, demanding blood. They called the human a liar, a manipulator, a dangerous outsider poisoning the court. One noble slammed his staff against the floor, demanding immediate execution. Another shouted that the human had insulted every empire present. More joined, their words sharp and desperate. The guards responded at once. They moved in perfect formation. Weapons lifted, energy fields locking into place. The sound of power filled the air. The human stood still as the circle tightened around him. He did not run. He did not argue. He did not look to the queen for protection. The alien queen watched everything unfold. her face unreadable, her mind racing. She felt the weight of the crown pressed down on her thoughts. This was the moment rulers feared most. Not war, not rebellion, but choice. If she allowed the execution, the nobles would be satisfied. Her authority would remain unquestioned. The truth would die quietly. If she stopped it, she would confirm their worst fears, that she was dangerous, that she was unpredictable, that she threatened the balance of power. Save face, or save truth. The guards reached the human. Energy restraints activated with a sharp hum. Still, he did not resist. He slowly lowered himself again. Not forced, not pushed, but by choice. Gasps rippled through the hall. The human knelt once more. But this time he did not face the queen. He turned slightly, placing himself between the guards and the nobles, as if his body alone could slow what was coming. The queen's eyes narrowed. This kneel was different. The human spoke again, his voice calm despite the weapons aimed at him. He said humans do not survive by being the strongest. A few nobles laughed bitterly at that. He continued, saying humans survive by knowing when to stand, and when standing means refusing to become what they fear. The hall grew quieter, not silent, but listening. The human said peace was not weakness. It was the hardest choice a species could make, because it required restraint when violence was easy. He said if the galaxy truly wanted survival, then killing truth would not protect it. Some guards hesitated. Just for a moment, the nobles noticed, and their anger sharpened. One noble screamed for the execution to proceed, accusing the queen of hesitation, accusing her of using the human as a symbol. The queen felt the pressure rise. Old instincts screamed for control, for dominance, for command through fear. She remembered the wars, the bodies, the burning stars. Power had won battles, but it had never brought peace. The human finished speaking. He lowered his head, accepting whatever came next. The guards prepared to strike. Energy surged brighter. The moment stretched thin. Then the queen moved. Her voice cut through the hall, like a blade. Clear, sharp, absolute. She commanded the guards to stop. The words hit harder than any weapon. The guards froze, weapons humming but unmoving. The nobles stared in disbelief. Some shouted in outrage. Others backed away slowly. The queen stepped down from the throne completely now. Her presence filled the space between the guards and the human. She looked at the nobles, at the fear behind their anger, at the lies they had protected for so long. Then she said the execution would not happen. The room erupted again, but this time the chaos felt different, uncontrolled, desperate. The queen raised her hand once more, and the room obeyed. She declared that truth would not die in her court. Not today. Not ever again. The human remained kneeling, alive, unbroken. The nobles realized something terrible in that moment. They had lost control of the story. The queen turned back to the human, her expression unreadable, and the galaxy realized that power had failed. But courage had just spoken. The throne room did not return to calm, but it shifted into something colder, more dangerous. The alien queen raised her voice once more, not in anger, but with command. She ordered a public trial, not behind closed doors, not whispered in private halls, but before the full court. The nobles froze. Some protested loudly. Others tried to speak over one another, but the queen's authority pressed down on them like gravity. She declared that accusations spoken aloud must now be defended aloud. That truth would no longer hide behind rank or tradition. The court was transformed. Holographic panels rose from the floor. Ancient recording systems activated. Witness platforms emerged where banners once stood. The nobles were called forward one by one, forced to repeat their claims, forced to explain the wars they blamed on the queen. At first, they spoke confidently, using old speeches, familiar stories repeated across generations. They spoke of aggression, of expansion, of a queen who hungered for control. The queen listened without interruption, her expression calm, her hands folded behind her back. Then she gave a single signal. The human stepped forward again. This time no one laughed. He activated a data projection. Simple, clean, undeniable. Old war records appeared in the air. Fleet movements, supply routes, timelines stretching back decades. Gasps echoed across the hall. The records showed borders crossed before declarations, weapons shipments arriving weeks before battles began, defensive fleets labeled as invasions. The nobles reacted instantly. Some shouted that the data was forged. Others demanded the source be destroyed. The human remained calm. He explained that humans archive everything. Because they must. Because forgetting history means repeating it. He said humanity had been watching quietly, not powerful enough to intervene, but careful enough to observe. Humans track trade, treaties, military movement hidden beneath diplomacy. More data surfaced, altered history logs, edited records where blame was shifted line by line. Hidden treaties appeared next, agreements signed in secret, promises of territory and profit made while wars still burned. The court grew louder, angrier, more afraid. Several nobles tried to leave, but the guards blocked every exit. The queen spoke again, her voice cold now. She demanded answers, not excuses. Under the weight of evidence, cracks began to form. One noble hesitated too long. His answers slowed, his confidence shattered. The human turned toward him, not accusing, just waiting. The pressure became unbearable. The noble's voice broke. He confessed. He admitted the treaties were real, that profits mattered more than peace, that blaming the queen was easier than facing shared guilt. The confession hit the court like a shockwave. Chaos erupted instantly. Nobles shouted at one another. Accusations flew in every direction. Alliances shattered in seconds. Old friends turned hostile. The queen watched as the truth finally broke free. Uncontrolled, violent, the human stood still amid the chaos, knowing one thing was now certain. The galaxy would never return to silence again. The chaos did not end quickly, but it burned itself out, like a fire with no more lies to feed on. The confession echoed again and again through the court systems. Recorded, transmitted, copied. No power in the hall could stop it now. One by one, nobles lost their voices. Their authority cracked. Their titles suddenly felt thin and weak. Guards no longer stood only for tradition. They stood for order, for truth. Several noble houses were stripped of command on the spot. Trade rights frozen. Military authority suspended. The queen watched as balance shifted, not in her favor alone, but toward reality. Her name, once spoken with fear and blame, now moved through the hall with hesitation, with doubt, with something close to respect. The wars that defined her rule were re-examined. The lies peeled away layer by layer, until the truth stood bare. She had not been the monster history painted. She had been the shield. The queen felt the weight lift. Not fully, never fully, but enough to breathe again. When the court finally quieted, she turned to the human. He stood where he had always stood. No throne, no armor, no banner. Just a man who had changed the direction of history by choosing to kneel. The queen stepped closer. Her presence commanded silence, without effort. She asked him the question again, but this time her voice was different. She asked why he truly knelt. Not for politics, not for strategy, not for survival. The human did not answer at once. He looked around the room, at broken pride, at shifting power. Then he looked back at her. He answered simply. He said humans kneel, so they can stand together later. The words were quiet, but they struck deeper than any declaration of war. He explained that humans learned early that unity is fragile, that respect builds bridges strength cannot. He said kneeling was not lowering oneself. It was choosing connection over distance. The queen felt something tighten in her chest, a feeling she had not allowed herself in a long time. Hope. She studied the human carefully, not as a ruler measuring value, but as a leader recognizing a truth she had almost forgotten. The court waited, uncertain, uneasy. Then the queen did something no alien ruler had ever done. She lowered herself, not to kneel, but to meet the human at eye level. Gasps spread through the hall. Some nobles staggered back. Others stared in disbelief. Rulers did not lower themselves. They commanded from above. But the queen broke that rule. She looked directly at the human, and then at the court. She declared that the age of fear-based rule was over, that alliances built on lies would no longer stand. She said the galaxy would learn a new way forward, one shaped by choice, by truth, by shared responsibility. The nobles realized something profound in that moment. They were no longer the center of the future. The queen rose again, stronger than before, not because she dominated the room, but because she no longer needed to. She turned toward the stars beyond the crystal walls, and the galaxy felt it. A shift, a change, a beginning. But even as hope spread, a question remained unanswered. What would the galaxy do when humans chose not just to kneel, but to stand? The throne room no longer felt like a place of judgment. It felt like a place of beginning. The chaos had settled into quiet order. Nobles stood apart now, divided not by species, but by truth. Some had lost power. Others had lost certainty. The alien queen stood at the center of it all, not as a ruler feared, but as one finally understood. She spoke to the court, and beyond it. Her words carried through every relay, every system listening. She announced a new alliance, not built on threat, not enforced by fleets or fear, but chosen freely. She said this alliance would stand on mutual respect, on shared responsibility, on the understanding that survival was not a competition. Some nobles resisted, their voices small now, drowned by the weight of what had already changed. Others listened carefully, realizing power no longer flowed in the old directions. The human stepped forward once more. No guards moved against him. No weapons followed his steps. He was no longer seen as fragile, no longer ignored. Humans had been underestimated for a long time, not because they lacked strength, but because they hid it behind patience. The queen acknowledged humanity openly, not as subjects, not as tools, but as equals. She said humans were trusted because they chose truth when silence was safer, because they chose respect when submission was expected. Across the galaxy, reactions spread like shockwaves. Some systems welcomed the change. Others feared it, but none could deny it. The old balance was gone. The queen turned toward the human, and for the first time, she smiled, not as a symbol, but as a leader sharing burden. She stood tall, the crown no longer a weight, but a promise. The human stood beside her. No throne, no title, yet equal in that moment. The crystal walls reflected them both, alien and human, standing not above others, but with them. Beyond the throne room, fleets stood down, borders softened, messages changed tone. The galaxy watched carefully, unsure, curious, hopeful. History recorded this moment differently than wars. No explosions, no victory chants, just a choice. Sometimes the smallest species makes the biggest choice. And sometimes, that choice changes everything.